Welcome everyone to Automating ArcGIS Content Discovery with FME, a real-world use case. And as Don mentioned just a few moments ago, if you missed it, this was the top most popular session featured at our peak of data and AI. So we're really excited to be bringing this to a larger audience today through this webinar. So thank you everyone for joining us. All right, so now we get to meet our presenters here today. I will pass things over to Don to kick off our introductions.
Sure, thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. This is what was a great one from the peak, and I'm Don Murray. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Safe Software, and and with that, I'm happy to introduce Kieran. Kieran, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for the opportunity to be here and to share this presentation with you once more. I'm Kieran O'Donnell. I'm from New Zealand, but currently living in Barcelona. I've spent about the last 10 years or so working as a GIS developer and an FME consultant, and just getting into launching this new product I've developed called Ripple, which is a really creative use of FME that solves some complex data challenges and some really good end-to-end automation. So I'm happy to be sharing that with you today.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I look forward to, to learning and more about it as well. So good. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, before I hand things over to Dawn here, just a brief intro to our platform if you're newer. If you have any audio issues during the webinar, just a reminder, you can click that help button on the bottom left. It has 4 simple steps to take. We have our emoji reaction button on the bottom middle, so share your reactions with us as we go. We love to see those.
Yeah, we sure do. Those are like candy for us. So yeah, they keep us going. So if you want to give us even more energy, just give us lots of emojis. Positive emojis are even really good. And here's the fact people may not have noticed, Elizabeth. Have you noticed that every emoji kind of looks like me?
Oh, I never pointed that one out, Don, but maybe you're right.
All emojis are bald. So there you go.
Oh. All right, and then we do have the questions tab as well. So as we're going through here, if you have any questions for Kieran, please do drop those into our questions tab, and then we will have time dedicated at the end to address those live. But we also do have Luke and Dave from our Safer team joining on the back end to help answer those as well. So yeah, do get your questions in as we go along. And then the chat, keep letting us know where you are tuning in from there and share any comments during the webinar. All right, so with that, I will prompt our presenters if we can turn off our webcams just to save on some bandwidth for the remainder here. And I will pass things over to Dawn for our agenda.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, so here's the agenda. Just a very quick introduction because we want to get right to Kieran where he can show, 4 amazing demos of what he does. And so he's going to outline, the challenge or the problem, the idea and the solution. And then Elizabeth and I will wrap it up with, resources and next steps and then some Q&A. So yeah. So quick introduction here. Yeah, so today Kieran's going to show us how you can automate ArcGIS content discovery, reporting and a relationship mapping using FME. ArcGIS obviously is the biggest vendor we work with, and so we're always excited to learn how FME and ArcGIS can work together to deliver even more value, and that's what Kieran and Ripple is going to show us today. So a little bit about the FME platform for those who are new. 3 components. FME Form is our IDE. That's where everything is built. So whether you're building automations or you're building no-code web apps or you're building workflows for our AR solution, FME Realize, everything starts in FME Form and you can build and test there. And FME Flow is where you enable the enterprise. Everything you build is then made enterprise ready to use and powers an entire enterprise with FME Flow. And the screenshot there is showing automations as one of the biggest things that people use FME Flow for. And of course, we have a SaaS version of FME Flow called FME Flow Hosted, which is single tenant for security. And then you can try that. So if you want to try FME Flow, certainly Flow Hosted is the easiest way to get started. And we have many organizations who actually run their production workflows with FME Flow hosted as well. So the choice is yours. And then FME Realize, we unveiled that at the peak. We're not going to talk about it in this one, but it's important to know that it is part of the FME Enterprise Integration Platform. It's a no-code, no-cost AR application, so you can view, edit, and look at your data. And of course, one of the strengths of FME, there's a few of them, but one of them, of course, is our unrivaled support for data types. And in the world of AI, where we talk about multimodal a lot, what multimodal means is just being able to work with all different types of data so that you can bring the power of AI to any data. And you can see many of them there. Suffice it to say, if there's data out there, FME probably supports it. And if you come across something, let us know, and we can make FME work with it. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Kieran, and he's going to talk all about what he's done with FME, ArcGIS, and automations.
Awesome. Thanks, Don, for that introduction. I'll get right into my presentation because I've got a lot of stuff to get through today and a lot of ground to cover. This presentation is all about ArcGIS, and ArcGIS is a platform that I've used pretty much since the start of my career in GIS. When I'm talking about ArcGIS throughout this presentation, because it's obviously a very large platform, what I'm referring to is ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Portal. So very much in the web space, where there's also ArcGIS Desktop and everything I'll stay away from for now. But yeah, so ArcGIS is really an excellent tool for building and sharing content. If you haven't used it before, it's a really powerful platform that lets you kind of publish data, create services, create maps, and then sort of share that via apps and dashboards and everything. It's such a great tool, but probably I think really the biggest downside to it is that because it's so easy to use, it can lead to this challenge with content sprawl, which is really difficult if you have to administer a large platform. This is kind of what I've seen in a lot of organizations. No matter what your best intentions are, you start with this really nice, clean ArcGIS environment, and then content starts to grow. People create apps, they create maps, exactly what the platform's designed for. Then over time, that platform grows and it grows. And then eventually when it comes time to understand the relationships and the interconnectedness between the content, it can become a little bit of a headache and maybe leave you feeling a bit like this. What I've witnessed is that the reality for a lot of GIS professionals out there is that you can spend a lot more time managing content in ArcGIS than you do actually building solutions, which I'm sure is not why a lot of us got into the industry. So the challenge I'm going to take you through today is really around discovering content relationships in ArcGIS. The pain points of this is that it's a really manual, a time-consuming job, and it is prone to error because of how manual it is. The dependencies aren't always clear, so while behind the scenes an app and a map linked together, that's actually very difficult to understand the complexities there. And there's really just no quick way to assess impact if you want to make changes in your environment. Looking at this in a very simplified view of how content can be connected to each other in ArcGIS, this is a very simple diagram because there's obviously a lot more content in it, or content types in ArcGIS, but I've just focused on some of the more core ones. On the left-hand side, we've got these sources, which are what I'd say are more upstream, and then on the right-hand side, the downstream sources. So your sort of maps for your apps and dashboards, the items in ArcGIS where you view the content in a front-end application, whereas sort of heading down towards the left, you get more into data sources and services. If we look at this first from the downstream perspective, we see that if you wanted to, say, look at an application and look further upstream, it's technically possible, but it is difficult. So from let's say a web experience, which is of course ArcGIS's newest and probably most powerful app building tool, you would be able to trace from a web experience find a map, and then from a map, you could then find services and then individual layers. That's possible, but still challenging and very time consuming. The bigger problem though, is if you wanted to look at downstream relationships. So if you started with a layer, you would of course be able to find the service that it's referenced in, but there's really no way to understand if you have a service, what maps that's referenced in, or from maps, which apps are referencing the map. Stopping short of going into every single app or map in your organization, which is of course very time consuming, there's really just no way to find out this information, which is a big challenge. So I had an idea. This idea I sort of came up with when I was, I guess, attending a lot of sprint planning. At this organization in particular, they're doing what I'd describe as a fairly loose version of Agile. But I sort of witnessed on these 2-week cycles, I'd witnessed that we would sit around and try and come up with the tasks that we were going to try and tackle in the coming fortnight. What I saw is that a huge amount of the time that we were spending was all about understanding and assessing impact of making quite a simple change. It could be something like a schema change or just like a data type change, things that naturally happen as part of the kind of life cycle of a GIS. But really what was hindering us is that we had to spend so much time trying to understand that if we made this change, what kind of other changes would have to be made, sort of cascading out from there. I would estimate that about 80% of time per developer per sprint was spent searching for content relationships. That's really just around assessing the impact of making what could be quite a simple change. And then I thought there had to be a way to automate that process, saving time and improving accuracy. So the solution I had, of course, involved FME, and that was to really automate this using an FME workspace. I used the ArcGIS REST API, which is a really powerful tool, which has easy support with HTTP callers in FME. And that workspace was designed to discover that content automatically. The workspace created relationships between the different types of content, linking apps to maps, maps to services, and everything else in between. And then finally, I used the HTML report generator transformer to generate reports. I'll now take you through a brief demo to show you my original solution. So we've probably all seen this dashboard before, unfortunately. This is built with what used to be operations dashboard, I think is just natively called dashboards in ArcGIS. It's a really powerful tool. You can see there we've got map in the middle. We've got these different widgets around the side. They're doing aggregate statistics based on different data sets that are being referenced in the app. There's a whole lot of tabs there. Everything's grouped by different time series data, by different localizations. It is obviously a lot of information which is hacked in behind the scenes to make this dashboard work. So that can be quite an overwhelming task to understand how this works. So I built what used to be on the hub. I think it's not there anymore. I think I started failing the automated tests, but the ArcGIS app tracer I designed to make it really simple to understand how an app was built. So you would just give it something simple like the URL and then the web connection as well if there was authentication required, and hit run basically. Fairly simple, and write the output to an HTML file. This is the output from it. So you can see, I'm sure anyone who's used the HTML report generator and the table feature will recognize this. But what we've got is the original item that I did a trace on, some key metadata attributes, and then down from there, we can see all of the related items to it. So that one dashboard had, I think it's got 6 or 7 different web maps. And then within each of those web maps, we've got references to different services. So from a very simple workspace, it's actually gone and pulled out a ton of information, which if we tried to, I guess, navigate through from the dashboard itself, that would be incredibly difficult. Awesome. So there's a few good things about this. There's a few bad things too, but we'll start with the good. What's great is that this provides this unified view where you can see all of the content dependencies from a single page. It is quite challenging to navigate through the many pages in ArcGIS to discover this content. So getting it all onto one page, I think, is a good step in the right direction. You can download and share these findings because we've sort of turned that into a file. And it does really save a lot of time. Automating this relationship discovery eliminates a lot of manual effort. The cons to this, though, that report is not particularly easy to look at. I authored it and I don't know what I'm looking at half the time. So it's kind of headed in the right direction, but it's not, I don't think it's a final product or solution. There's limited scope as well. So you can see often a lot of ArcGIS implementations have different portals and different ArcGIS online accounts. So having or sort of needing authentication across many different ones is perhaps useful as well. And then still some performance improvement needed. It does still take time to loop through all of those different sort of REST API calls. And probably the bigger con, which I've forgotten to include in this slide, is thinking back to that relationship diagram I showed before. This is really great to sort of look from the downstream consumer, so an app or a dashboard, and look up, but it doesn't have any support to go the other way. So yeah, it's a good start, but certainly not there. So the next challenge I realized was to translate this information into a more user-friendly format. The way that I did this was to refine my solution and create a dashboard. My solution is kind of funny one, is the problem with having too much content is to go and create more content. So I created a ArcGIS Experience Builder application. The application or the dashboard provides a view of multiple environments. So you could sort of, chain together multiple ArcGIS portals or ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Portal. I know some organizations could have up to 6 or 8 different implementations depending on what they use it for. So, being able to bring all those together in one place and create this big catalog of data is really powerful. And then, being able to deliver some quick insights to see what the relationship is between content, users, and groups. So I'll quickly jump into another demo to show you a little bit about the dashboard. So this interface might look fairly familiar to you, and that is by design. So I created this dashboard within ArcGIS Experience Builder to give you a sort of similar look and feel to how ArcGIS works already. I wanted it to feel like kind of an extension to the platform rather than sort of this completely new, different user experience. So at the top here, you can see we can flip between different tabs if we're interested in content or users or groups. We're just focusing on content today, of course. I've used the list widget to kind of build this full catalog of all of the content and all of the items that are within an ArcGIS organization. And if you select a feature, it should update with those key metadata attributes. You can see there it's got the summary, the description, and some things like when it was created and updated, as well as a nice linking between groups so that you can see if something has been shared with a group. Flicking over, this is now actually looking at the National Park Service in the United States. I've just had to leverage a bit of stuff in the public domain for these demos. But here I've selected the privies layer as part of the Appalachian National Scenic Trail Service. And you can see there, it just updates you with all the information really, really nicely. And then, of course, being within ArcGIS, you get a lot of tools that come straight out of the box. So here I'm just showing that you can filter and look for particular content types. It brings through all the thumbnails nicely. Yeah, really easy to navigate and find content, which is one of the first challenges. Now I'll just jump back into my slide deck and talk about a few highlights to that. So I think this is a big improvement on the first, it's kind of solving a different problem, but what I really like about sort of turning this into a dashboard is having this single centralized view of everything, especially when you have to manage multiple environments. It is quite challenging to know where something is stored. So bringing all of your ArcGIS content together into one place just makes it really easy to stay within a single page application. I wanted to build this within ArcGIS as well because I really like being able to leverage existing infrastructure. I don't like having to add, extra virtual machines or servers or software to solve a problem with your existing, platforms. So I really wanted to use ArcGIS to help kind of solve the challenge that I was experiencing within ArcGIS. And then this has support for multiple environments. I didn't touch on it in the demo, but you can see there it's easy to flip between different environments. So I think in that one, it was maybe the Park Service from Canada and the National Park Service from the States. So being able to sort of chain those together so that you can find everything to do with all of your ArcGIS is a good step in the right direction. Where I've got this to as well, another really cool highlight about this is the automated deployment. So I built this a few times for a couple of different customers. And, one of the challenges with any sort of graphical interface application is really the fact that you have to click everything and manually configure it. So after a few times, I realized that I needed to find a way to automate this deployment. And of course, I decided that FME was a good candidate for that. So where I've got it to is that you have very minimal user input to build this entire dashboard. It only requires an Excel sheet with approximately 15 configured cells. I've actually changed this to a JSON file, which is also driven off an FME Flow app now. So it's a bit nicer than Excel, but it's not recorded in this demo. Then you just deploy this full application using FME Form just by running a workspace and using an Excel sheet as an input. And the application is deployed in under 30 seconds. So it really is a very seamless way to get set up and running. So I'll just give you a brief overview of that demo as well. So yeah, it's actually quite a simple workspace when you get down to it. I'm not going to dive into it too much because it's really very similar to any other kind of REST API driven workspace. You see there's a lot of HTTP callers, sort of unpacking of JSON and then re-managing those attributes to keep your workspace nice and tidy. Fairly standard stuff. So in that first bookmark, what we do is we create some components in FME Flow using the FME Flow REST API. So creating a token, storing that somewhere, assigning the right permissions to that token. Pretty simple. And then, as we head over to the right, this middle bookmark is creating all of the app content in ArcGIS. So again, leveraging the ArcGIS REST API, I've kept my workspace nice and tidy by hiding that behind another custom transformer. But ultimately what we do is we create a dashboard using the REST API, we publish the service, and we create a group and share that content. And then lastly, once we've finished with that, we then push everything up to our FME Flow environment. So that's done with those last 4 HTTP callers. We use a FME Flow projects to get all of the workspaces up there. This is the deployment file. So it's really simple. These 4 columns or these 4 cells are all you need to configure for your kind of global variables or global parameters, sort of telling it where you want the app hosted. And then in the environments, we have a little bit more, but it's really just specifying what content you want to include in your dashboard. So in this example, I've paired together TfL, or Transport for London, with the New Zealand Transport Association, or NZTA. Not that you'd ever be doing that in a regular case, but as I said, I'm kind of relying on stuff in the public domain. You can see there that short name that I'm highlighting there is being embedded inside the dashboard when we create it, and then by specifying the URL, we can then tell it what content we want to go and browse for. All right. Cool. So now getting back to probably a bit closer to what the main problem was that I had was all around the relationships. So I really liked the idea of using the HTML report generator, but I think just the struggle with, as I said, the content discovery across many different platforms, and then also the usability of that report, I didn't think was particularly good. So I came up with this quite nice report, I think, to help solve this challenge. So from the dashboard, we can have instant relationship discovery, eliminating that manual searching. And then this has really clear and easy to understand visual insights for technical and non-technical users. And then these reports, much like the earlier one, interactive, downloadable, and shareable. So rather than talking about it, I will just show you. So this is picking up where we left off with that last, I guess the last deployed application. So looking here at this web experience, it's the New Zealand Cycling Network, which is published by the New Zealand Transport Association. We really easily just click this Run Trace button, which triggers a webhook in FME Flow and generates a report. So what it returns is a list of all of the items that are related. And here in the bottom right-hand corner, a really nice kind of network diagram, which shows how this app or this web experience has been constructed. So you can see you've got an experience, an image, a couple of maps, and a couple of services. That's a fairly simple, a very simple application. I wish all of them were that easy to unpick. So jumping back into the back to the original dashboard, we'll look at this other one, which is a data set with the state highway network. As you can imagine, that would be published in a few more places perhaps. And so again, we trigger the webhook, and we can see here we've got our route node, the state highway network, and then a really clear and easy, I hope, to understand network graph, which shows how this data set has been related to other features. I gave this graph a lot of features that relate kind of to a mapping experience. You might recognize a lot of those icons as well from the Calcite design system. Things like legends, home controls, zoom controls, all those sorts of things that you'd expect to find in a mapping application, given that this is also sort of based around a mapping platform. We can highlight the different nodes if we need to. Turn on a legend, turn it on or off, make it larger if you need a little bit more real estate, kind of giving it this appy feel, which really lets you dive into your data. And maybe you're really interested in looking at just apps or map. We've got these nice filters over here in that table down the left-hand side. Now jumping into one other final example with these relationships, we've got, I actually don't know what this data set's about, but it's had about 2.5 million views. So I would imagine that this is featured in quite a few different apps on the National Park Service GIS online platform. So we'll give that a trace in just a moment and see what it's connected to. And that's where things start to get, this is really the problem that we're trying to solve, or the challenge that we're trying to make easier for ourselves. If you were given this task and you said, how is this service connected to it? Like, what's connected to the service? And these are all of the things that you're looking for. It's such an error-prone activity. So really being able to kind of systematically do it and see how one thing's connected to another is such a powerful tool. You can see my network graph isn't perfect. There's still a little bit to go with the user experience, but it does, I think, really simplify the whole experience. I've also popped this out into a full screen. This is really helpful if you do have a large, very interconnected item in ArcGIS that you need to get a good grasp on. And what's funny about this as well is I'm sure a lot of our other ArcGIS administrators out there will recognize that this is all public content. So really this is a very simple breakdown of how big the challenge is, because in other, in your actual implementations, I would imagine it's probably 10-to-1 in terms of how much content you have, which is private versus how much is shared. So the complexity behind how everything's connected is I'm sure, a lot more significant than what we're seeing here in this public forum. Cool. I really just want to highlight what's really cool about some of Safe Software's more flexible licensing options. So the FME CPU usage engines are a really great tool for something like this. If you haven't used them before, they basically work on kind of a credit-based system. So you're only charged for, the amount of time, the amount of CPU time in particular, that your FME Flow environment spends actually processing data. So this is really powerful when you have really short, sharp workflows, not the sort of larger geoprocessing tools that you might be sort of used to running. You will have seen there in that recording that they were really quick, snappy reports. So when you click a button, you want that, report generated and returned back to the user immediately. You don't want them waiting, behind a queue for this other job, which is going to take a couple of hours, because it's just not the user experience that you're looking for. So in this case, I think my average CPU time for those reports is only about half a second. So that's the time that it takes to actually generate them. So those credits are going to trickle down very, very slowly for something like that. But, the thing with CPU usage engines, which is great, is that you have unlimited engine numbers, meaning that FME can scale to meet demand rather than sort of stacking up one behind each other. Being able to generate them, and have them multiple requests sort of initiating at a time is really helpful. Then, they're not for everything. When you've got those larger jobs, you probably do still want to stick with your standard engines, but for a use case like this and a lot of other things like FME Flow apps, CPU usage engines are a really powerful tool. Cool. Just to round this out, I just want to talk a little bit about who benefits from this and who I've built this for. We've got our GIS technical leads and developers, managers and business analysts, and some junior analysts and some administrators. The idea with the tech leads and developers, it's really easy to get quick content oversight and easily catch errors. So when you're working and maybe needing to review a solution that maybe another team member's built, being able to instantly understand how something works is, a really powerful way to get information easily. For your managers and business analysts, I think this is really helpful to reduce bottlenecks and accelerate some decision making. I know I've seen and heard about this a lot, that you could be in a meeting where someone mentions, I don't know, the parking app that the parking team use, and of course you've never heard about it before. What this would help you do is find that content item instantly from within your dashboard and get a really good handle on all of the information that's related to it by just clicking a button, rather than sort of needing to rely on your technical resource to go and unpick a solution and create some documentation for you. This would help you get that information a lot faster. And then lastly, for your analysts and administrators, I think this would be a really helpful tool to streamline help desk support. So being able to understand what's connected. I have experienced this before myself, where someone will report an issue or a bug, or an app's not responding. Trying to understand it immediately, what makes up this tool, seeing key information like when it was last updated, seeing the reach of some of those things. If you can pinpoint the item that's the issue, you can then really quickly communicate with your customers to see who's affected. It's super helpful to just get that access to everything in an instant. And just a couple of key takeaways. I've been working on this for a couple of years now, and I've gone through so many iterations. At times, my workspaces have been pretty horrific, pretty large and complicated. And I've really just boiled this down to make it much simpler and automated, rather than stepping through each thing. So one of my colleagues, Mike, who's done a lot of mentoring for me over my career, is he said something pretty early on to me, and he said, if it can be done manually, like it can be done automatically. So I think at the time we were trying to unpick what we were told was an FTP site, which was not an FTP site. And we sort of simulated the browser experience using FME. And I've sort of taken that lesson and gone, okay, if we can publish a service or create like a hosted feature service or create a dashboard in the browser, then there's no reason that we can't do it with FME and do it automatically. So really just taking your automations to the nth degree where you don't have to do any of the work that could be done automatically. And then the other one really is around making the data engaging. I know that relationship graph at the end there is a really powerful tool. And I realized as I went through this that data is only valuable if it's understandable. Really, there's actually no difference in what content exists in that very first report I showed in the first demo and what information is in the network graph. But I know which one's a whole lot more useful and which one's more helpful to someone to digest. So yeah, I think as maybe data integration specialists or ETL developers or FME developers, whatever you're working with, and we do have a bit of a responsibility to make that data understandable and not just take it to the very first step, which is maybe exporting it. If you can make it engaging and make it, maybe a bit more interesting, you might help your customers get a lot further along and get more out of the work that you've done. But yeah, thanks again for the opportunity to share this with you. Thank you to Safe Software, Elizabeth and Don for joining. And yeah, this has been really great.
Wow. So thanks so much, Kieran. That was amazing. Four great demos, and you can see some information there. If you want to reach out to Kieran and Ripple, you can see, you just say hello at ripple.uno. I love that. That's great. We should have that, Elizabeth. That is super friendly. That's a great URL. And Kieran works very closely with our partner in Australia, Locus. Ruby Donaldson, she was at the peak as well. She's great. Locus is a great partner. So yeah. So thank you so much. And a little more just to close off. Again, Safe Software. We're based in Canada. We have 200,000 users around the world. We have partners in 140 different countries. And you can see our security and other credentials on the left-hand side, always getting more. And we just love what we do. Customer obsession, it drives us. And so let us know how we can help you. One of the things we say about FME, all data, any AI, that is our tagline. And the whole goal is to allow you to use all of the data that you have and any AI. So if there's an AI that you want to use, you should be able to use it. And that's what we do. Because what AI do you want to use often depends on what you're trying to solve. So for example, if you're working with, extracting stuff out of imagery, you might use Google Gemini. If you're doing text processing, you might use OpenAI. There's just all these different AI technologies have different strengths, and you might be, you should be able to use the one that you want to use. And so that's what it's all about. Use all the data you have with any of the AI tools you want so that you can do the job and get the most value. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Elizabeth.
Fantastic. Thanks, Don. Yeah, so just to walk us through some resources here today, at Safe, we're all about free resources. If you have yet to check out our academy, it has guided learning at your fingertips and free instructor-led training. Also, our webinar program, I'll highlight that as we do have some recently posted new webinars online. So definitely check those out, safe.com/webinars. And then, of course, hundreds of on-demand webinars you can search depending on what topic you are looking to learn more about. In terms of next steps to take here today, we would love to help you get started with anything data. Get in touch with us at info@safe.com. And then, of course, if you do have any follow-up questions for Kieran after the webinar, please do feel free to email him. And as a reminder, this is a good time to drop a reminder. We will have a Q&A period in just a moment here. So please, if you have any initial questions, feel free to drop those in if you have yet to do so. And then our FME Accelerator course, it's 90 minutes. It's free of charge. You don't have to download anything. And it's a great place to get started with the basics of learning FME. Claim your community badge. We have the code on the screen here for today. I will also drop that in the chat. So if you're a member of our community and you like to redeem these badge codes as a thank you for joining our webinar here today, please feel free. And if you aren't a member of our community, I would highly encourage you to check it out. It's a great place to both network with other users and experts alike. Lots of forums and questions and solutions going on over in the community. All right, and with that, we do have 20 minutes remaining for questions, which is fantastic since I know there was a lot of really great ones that came in. I will invite Kieran and our Q&A team if they wish to join on the stage here, and we can take a look through them together. Awesome. Yeah, a lot of great questions came in, Kieran, and great feedback. So thanks so much.
Thanks for all the feedback so far. I'm just having a good browse through a few of the comments. So yeah, thanks heaps for the feedback. I can definitely answer a few of them.
Awesome.
Do you want me to dive in, Elizabeth, or?
Yeah, Kieran, I'll just pass the baton to you if there's one you want to pick out to start with.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so I can see now as well that there's obviously a few things I missed my cue for in terms of what I should be, in terms of what I explained, and that's, I guess, the nature of running through a demo. But there's obviously a few questions there around the network graph and how that whole process works. Really, it's a webhook triggering FME Flow, and an FME workspace is being run. So I really like using webhooks with FME Flow to generate HTML reports because it's a great way to sort of create some interactivity from a web application. So yeah, ultimately it's just a workspace firing and returning HTML back to you via the data streaming service, which is, yeah, a super powerful way to get great information back. I think data virtualization could maybe do a lot of those features by just embedding the data in there. But of course, when I built this, I didn't know that was coming. So yeah, I was just streaming the entire HTML back rather than the data within it. The graph itself is using D3, which is a fantastic open source library. One of my colleagues who's joined us today, Sam Vernon, was showing me knowledge graphs one time, which was a really powerful tool to show the relationships between different things. And so he was looking at a whole platform in its entirety. And I sort of wanted this to boil this down to a really small targeted approach to that, I guess. So in a way, I've kind of built a miniature knowledge graph, which is the network graph that we see of one particular solution. And that kind of answers another question there about being able to explore all the connections in the network view. It's definitely possible, but sometimes that one's a little bit challenging because I guess because the interconnectedness is so great in ArcGIS, if you start looking at one thing and see what that's connected to, and then see what everything that was connected to is connected to, it turns into this enormous sort of, I don't know what the right word is. Spiderweb's probably spiderweb is an understatement, I think. So yeah, I did attempt that and see if I could like map an entire implementation at once, but even my browser couldn't keep up with it on a new Mac. So I figured that it was probably not where I wanted to go. What else have I got in here? So I think I've run how do you make the run trace job run instantly? I've covered that. Bruce has asked about the inspecting the usage statistics. Not yet. All I've got at the moment is the item views. I did have usage statistics in there at one point, but I actually removed it. I think I liked what Don said at the peak at one point. He said, we can do anything, but we can't do everything. And that sort of stuck out at me as there was a lot of features that I've sort of put into Ripple at one point or another and then stripped back out because I wasn't happy with them. So I guess it's in the works would be my answer there. Nate's question, is there a way to determine what applications and maps utilizing a feature service or layer? Hopefully we answered that. So you would browse to that from the dashboard, select the item, hit run trace, and then you would get the connectivity of everything which is connected to it. We had an early question from Roberto about the permission boundaries. So this is a little bit, I don't want to say sneaky, but there is a way that I've done this, is that you would use I guess an account that has permissions to discover everything. But by doing that, all it is sort of creating a repository of its existence. It doesn't bypass the security itself. So that's I guess a way that I've designed it, so that, because I think one of the problems you have is like maybe a junior analyst or someone who doesn't have permissions to see everything, is that when you try and find something, you don't know about its existence if it hasn't been shared with you. And so as someone who's trying to troubleshoot a platform, you're kind of flying a little bit blind there. So it's essentially creating a repository of the existence of the items, but it doesn't bypass the sharing itself. If you tried to link to that item and navigate to it, it would still block you, but at least you knew it was there, and that maybe that was perhaps the cause of your problems, or that this app was a downstream consumer of the service that you need to change. That may, hopefully that answers that one for you. Couple more questions. There was something about about CSVs and XMLs. I haven't focused on that right now. I've sort of just tried to, that was Olivia's question, an early one, I think. I've just tried to focus on items for now, being sort of the core stuff that's in ArcGIS. So if you added, say, a CSV or an XML file via a URL to ArcGIS, then it would register it. But if it's not registered that way and it's just been added directly via the URL, it's kind of ignored. And I guess that's just the only way around it, because if you started searching for any link within your portal, you're going to end up with every social link in every app and things like that, which is just too large a challenge to try and tackle, I think. Where am I at? Okay, Montana, I think I've maybe answered that one as well, around the network diagram, utilizing ArcGIS knowledge or all source. So yeah, that was D3. I didn't know ArcGIS was coming out with a knowledge graph either. So yeah, that's that really. Sam, how would someone watching going about getting this in their organization? Yeah, that's something that we've just got to launching really. So if you are interested in sort of getting this, I've designed it so that it's completely deployable, which you might have noticed throughout the presentation. The idea is just that it's a license really, so that if you need this and you have this challenge, that it's deployable onto your FME and your ArcGIS, and it's so seamless to deploy. So contact me, or as Don mentioned, contact Ruby, our reseller partner in Australia. Yeah, just feel free to contact either one of us if you'd like to chat some more, because we'd be happy to talk. Sorry, David, there are no demo workspaces available to download.
And I'll drop Kieran's email as well in the chat again, just so everyone has it for easy reference.
Thanks.
Fantastic. You've done great, Kieran. I know there was a lot of questions to get through here. I think, just a couple remaining. And
cool,
this is actually, when Kieran's just going through the questions right now, I'll just note as well, if we don't get to your question live today, just so you know, we will follow up via email. So not to worry, but we've gotten to a lot here.
Sam, that follow-up around would this sort of functionality ever appear in the core platform FME form flow? Maybe that's a question for the Safers team. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
or maybe a question for fun.
Yeah, we might have to follow up on that one, unless Dave or Luke happen to have any insight there at this point. But that might be a more future-facing question.
Yeah, no problem. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it's Jan or Jan, but is the spider chart embedded as an HTML page in the Experience Builder? No, it's not. It's it's served back via the data streaming service in FME Flow. It would work really nicely if it was in the if it was embedded directly, so you just clicked it and it updated automatically. But at the time, there wasn't really an option for that. And I think the other part is Experience Builder can be a little bit funny embedding code directly, I've found. So I stayed away from that one and just went with data streaming. But like I mentioned, the new data virtualization may assist with that as well. Bruce, there's a question in the chat asking to put the graph component name in the chat. That's just D3. Let me, D3. There we go. I'll put that in the chat now.
Perfect.
That trace button, does that send an API call? Oh, cool. I think Luke's already answered that one for me. Yeah, just a webhook trigger, a very simple webhook, and data streaming.
All right. I think we should be all good to wrap up now. Kieran, was there any others that you wanted to?
No, I think I've managed to get through everything. Yeah, so thanks. I mean, if unless anyone's got any more questions, I think that's about it. And like I said before, if you want to follow up with me or Ruby, then please send Ruby a message if you're interested in getting this at your organization. And if you want to chat about the product or have any more questions, then yeah, I'm just always happy to answer.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kieran. Huge thank you for all your time and presenting this webinar here today. It's fantastic to get in front of more users. Clearly, they all got a lot of value out of today's content. So thanks again for your time. And to our Q&A support team as well. And to our whole audience, thank you for your time and joining today. We hope you got a lot of value out of today's content. If you do have any more questions, we will leave things running for a few more minutes. So feel free to get those in and we'll keep an eye on the back end. But yeah, as just to reiterate, if you do have any follow-up questions for Kieran or you're interested in learning more about the solution, feel free to reach out to him. That email I dropped in the chat, I'll drop it in again just so it's top of mind there. But yeah, we hope you all have a great rest of your days ahead. And if you have a moment to fill out our webinar survey, we do really appreciate any feedback. Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a great
Thanks, everyone.
Bye for now.